Hi, Abhijit. Welcome to Heroes of New York.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here.
Abhijit, how are you doing today?
All good. Excited about the launch of my upcoming book, Dreamers and Unicorns. Looking forward to that, prepping for it.
Well,
Look,
congratulations. When can we expect it?
we should have the pre-order ready by November 3rd and launch on 16th of November.
Wow, that's
So
great. That's great. You've used the lockdown very productively, if I can say so.
completely, completely. I had actually submitted my manuscript for the book, but then given the fact that, so much about the world of work changed because of the lockdown, I decided I would rewrite the entire book. And, so from March, I have been writing this book all over again, and now it's gone for print. So,
It's amazing.
um,
I feel like a lot of people have found the lockdown so beneficial. It's taken up their productivity. They have ventured out to, follow their passions. But there are people who are also struggling with it. And that's why we have
yeah,
been.
I think it depends. It depends on how the lockdown sort of impacted you. For some people, yes, it's been a very productive time, but for many people, it's been a time of struggle. So yes, I'm very grateful that I am in the former category.
Right, right. And Abhijit, you've worked with people from all sectors and industries, and I guess you have a bird's eye view of how the digital workplace looks like today, right? And what do you feel about this consensus that there's been a peak in productivity since the lockdown because people are mostly home, they have no excuse, so they're in front of their screens and they're working. Do you feel it's a short-term gain?
I definitely think it's a short-term gain. I also think that what has happened is a lot of people, when I speak to them, a lot of people are absolutely paranoid about, being impacted because the employers are sometimes, when the business is slowing down, they need to thin down the workforce, and people are sort of not really taking chances. So there is a section of the workforce which is also trying to make sure that they want to tell the employer that they are really working hard, and that they should continue to be their part of the deal. So that's one part of it. But yes, I mean, people are saving on the commuting time. People are, you kind of are really in front of your computer all day. But I also think that too much of this is potentially going to be impacting the creative element of the work. So, in some sense, productivity and creativity do have opposing forces. So I think creativity is going to take a little bit of a hit.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear that productivity and creativity can be opposing. And that brings me to my other question around creativity, right? We perform even better in groups, especially if you're a knowledge worker. It's imperative to work as a team, brainstorm, whiteboard, and those elements are missing now. And how do you think that will be impacted if the long term is going to be remote work?
I think there are two phases of creativity. There is a phase where you benefit from a very divergent exposure. So if you're meeting people who are very different, you're working in teams, you are sort of riffing off each other's ideas. That is actually a great time when meeting other people is very productive, and it should be done. But then there is another phase where what is happening is you're really trying to put those ideas into one place. So when you write a book, for example, in the first part, which most people seem to think is the reason why they want to write, because it's such a creative, fun way to write a book. But that is just barely 10 or 15% of the process of writing a book. The other 90% is really the brutal portion where you sit down distraction free and really write. So it's a convergent process, which actually gets the book done. You can get lots of ideas. So I think it's a good mix. Um, People are trying to sort of work around in terms of using digital medium to, the way you and I are working on a podcast right now together. In the same way, there are groups. So technology has made it much better, but I still think technology has a certain amount of catching up to do because it's not the same as being in the same place with another person in person. So some of the professions, for example, if you're a musician, you like to perform because you riff off each other's energy. It's not just the music that you're sort of getting inspired by. So those are professions which do get impacted when you are not able to do it in real life and face to face. There is also, in businesses, when you hire people, yes, they are sort of, getting on with their roles. But, there are a whole lot of elements about the company culture when you observe people, when you see people from other departments, when you do that. A lot of it has to do with building relationships, not just in a structured, task related fashion, which can be done actually on the digital medium. But I think what the digital medium doesn't do is a spontaneous conversation, where you can
Right.
just walk down the hallway and bump into somebody and stop there for a couple of minutes and have a conversation. Those are missing. And that sometimes creates your emotional bond with the organization. So I think that's taking a hit for sure.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. The random conversations, the coffee talks, and especially the fact that work is really a social experience or exercise for a lot of people.
It
You
is,
know?
and so is learning. I mean, students when they're protesting, because content transfer is efficient when it's done, online in this particular way. But a lot of people do not know how to build the social part of the learning experience, and which is why people resent having to learn, online and pay the fee for as if they were going there, because the playground experience is missing, the social experience is missing, living in the dorm is missing, having meals together is missing, having a lot of fun and creative work is missing. So I think education is a lot more than just content transfer. So I think that's the element of work and living which all of us really are pining for.
Yes. And speaking of education, when you go to college, those relationships that you build there, the bonds that you make, those ones last a lifetime. And I think students are missing out on that big time right now.
Yes, I definitely think that they are missing out. And, also there's a whole lot of things that happen much better when you talk to somebody. You are able to sort of, go back spontaneously and knock on someone's door and say, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. That is a very fundamental experience of, living and working. Right now, we don't have a choice. So I guess we are really trying to justify why this is pretty much efficient and good enough. But as I always believe that there is efficiency and then there is effectiveness. I think effectiveness needs the human contact because our life is really a social experience in every field that you can think of, whether it's research or learning or working, everything. So at all ages it's the social experience which really makes a difference. That's what makes it memorable. Your memories are all social experiences. It's not the content. You don't remember that on 14th of August in that year I learned about chlorophyll, but you remember that conversation when the teacher showed you that leaf and you sort of thought about it and went back fascinated about the world of leaves. And so those are the kind of things that I think get missed out when we look at the way we are operating today. But it's something that we have to live with. So yes, we'll make the most of this.
Absolutely, you summed it up well. And when you speak of social experiences, that life is a sum of social experiences, right? It brings me to this conversation around social capital. A lot of people
Hmm.
believe the spike in productivity is also a result of the social capital that we probably built before the COVID hit, pre-COVID days, whatever relationships you had, you're working on that. But imagine
Right.
someone joins an organization today. Their onboarding is virtual. They never meet their colleagues, their bosses, and it's hard to build social capital and also to understand the culture of a company because culture is really made of the people who work there.
Yes, absolutely. I totally, believe in that because, there are procedures and there are company norms and there are those things that you can figure out, which you don't need to really be in the place. But then there are, different things that you learn by observing others. You learn how, let's say, people behave in a room. On a Zoom screen, people are all lined up side by side on little tiles all across the screen, but you don't get to see a lot of things, the exchange of glances when somebody smiles or sniggers or does something. So those are the kind of things that give people an idea about the flavor of the place, the smell of the place, as some of the writers talk about it. That is really very vital. Also, what happens is when people have a pre-existing relationship where the trust has been built already, so you already know what the other person is all about and you trust the person and that basic relationship is in place, then it's easy. Then you actually don't even need to have a video conversation. But when you are actually looking to work with people who are you've never met and worked with before, seeing the person is a much more effective experience than, let's say, doing it on telephone. However, it is also true that you get Zoom fatigue or video fatigue because we are not used to looking at the other person in the eye, and so many people's faces for extended spans of time. So it's emotionally draining, and it therefore drains out people a lot faster. So therefore, if you see that online learning experiences, webinars, etc., actually need to be much shorter than what they are. So if we are used to having, say, 90-minute sessions, otherwise we tend to have 90-minute conversations when it's a webinar. It's not very effective because people really start to fade out beyond a certain point of time. And my estimate, when I've looked at it, beyond 45 minutes to 60 minutes, there's a drop in the amount of effectiveness, especially when you're dealing with strangers. If you're dealing with people you're familiar with, then it doesn't matter. You can go all the way up to a much longer span of time. But when you're dealing with people you've never worked with, then I think the time really makes a difference.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Zoom fatigue. I feel I experience it, but I don't hear it being acknowledged in any discussions
How do you
around.
deal with it? What do you do when you experience Zoom fatigue?
Well, for one, I'm not someone who likes to stay in front of the screen, but there are office meeting calls. There's the school that's online for my son, so I have to be in those
Right.
calls, and it
Mm.
begins to take a toll. I can only imagine the stress for parents who have more than one kid and they're working as well at the same time. And
Mm.
then there's family. Living in New York, we have to talk with family back home, which are again video calls. And trust me when I say it, it's really stressful. I try to cut down on meetings that I don't have to be on. It's about
Right.
choosing the
Right.
priorities, picking your priorities, and trying to be there in person for your child and people
Mm.
around you, and talking in person versus being on the screen or texting. Small tips that I try to, keep a balance, strike a balance between the digital and the real world.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very well put through. And we always assume that everybody has the same infrastructure options, in terms of space, the connectivity, the number of devices, and all of that. I mean, I was talking to somebody who says that, I've got two kids who both need devices because the classes are going on in parallel. I need a device because, I'm working. My spouse needs a device, and so when you sort of look at that, and then they're having to, they've got parents, elderly parents at home, who need a device, so whether it's a phone or all of that. I mean, and they're saying that it's crazy, the number of devices, and it's sort of putting a strain. So we need to upgrade to a faster speed connectivity and all that. So it's a cycle which goes on. And I think these are challenges we never thought we are going to experience. And everybody, when it happened in the beginning, I think everybody had a different view of the timeline. Kind of initially, people thought it's a couple of days, couple of weeks, okay, maybe another month or so, and we are done. And now suddenly, when you think about it, it's been a few months, and we don't know whether we are at the early stage of the solution, or at the late stage of the solution, or how long is this going to go on for another few months, quarters, or years? We don't know. So I think depending on what you believe is the final timeline, your response to the scenario changes. So you either
Absolutely.
begin to feel hopeful or very despondent.
Yes, yes. Going back to this point on Zoom fatigue and the etiquette of, limiting the time you spend on in meetings, I really hope that, corporate leaders listen in and take some action towards that end.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, because when they are at the receiving end today, one of the positive things about Zoom, or working on video of any kind, is that it's also in some sense reduced the hierarchical scenario in the office kind of a setting. You can see the person in a bigger office, or occupying the head of the table during the meeting, etc., and so you can automatically know that this is the more important person to address. And all those things, people who didn't really quite have a share of voice sometimes now have the ability to be on the same platform. You're one of the many tiles, regardless of senior or junior person that you are. And so I think it's creating very interesting dynamics, but it's a new world whose norms are still being formed.
I can relate with this. I mean, I feel like you can be more confident because you're actually speaking to a screen versus sitting in a room full of people. where there are all kinds
Yeah.
of personalities, but that's not going to help you when you actually step out and have to interact
Yes.
with people in reality.
Eventually, that's going to happen.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. But when you speak about physical spaces, Abhijit, it's very interesting. Since we don't go to a real workplace anymore, we work from home. Uh, the office has disappeared. The workplace is the bedroom, and it's also causing the disappearance of boundaries in our different roles. I'm a
Mhm.
mother, I'm
Mhm.
working, and I'm also
Mhm.
hosting this podcast. But my son doesn't see
Mhm.
that. To him, I'm his mom, so I need to be there. And that's a demand on me. And there's no way I can justify saying, oh, no, I'm working right now.
Right. I also think that, organizations are therefore beginning to see the person as a human being, with multiple roles. Think about it, earlier when we used to go to the office and be co-located, you actually had to wait for an office party or, want to bring your child to work day kind of thing, or those occasions where you begin to see something about the other person which is not bound by the role and the level and the hierarchy. So you begin to see the human being behind the CEO, or the mailbox person. So you kind of really begin to see them as human beings. I think that is happening a lot more because we are looking at that. But I also think along with that comes this whole loss of privacy for one. And you're beginning to see the circumstances in which people live. Hopefully, it's going to make us a lot more empathetic towards our colleagues. And I hope that that's what is going to happen after the initial kind of, uh, you begin to see people, you are learning much more about the person than what you intended to. So hopefully it's going to make us more responsive, respectful, and empathetic towards each other. I certainly hope that that's how it will be.
I hope so too. It reminds me of the BBC dad who became famous a year or two ago when his daughter
I know,
Anastasia
16
walked in.
million views.
Isn't
Yes,
it the norm today? He led the way, but
yes, yep. At that point of time, it was funny, but now, we've all gone through our version of that equivalent. Pets, operating and, walking in. So the other day, I was chatting with a colleague of mine, who's the CEO of a very large company, and he was having this long conversation. We were talking about something pretty serious, and suddenly, I just noticed something black, the screen. So I said that I can't really see you. I'm sorry, something has happened to the camera. He says, no, my cat has just walked in, and he jumped onto the table, has come in there and parked himself and refuses to get up. I'm trying to move him, but he sort of scratches me every time I touch him. So I'm sorry, but we'll have to do it another time, or I have to switch to my phone. So yes, we are seeing those human moments. So I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah, it's probably those are things that I don't think I've ever in my life had a conversation with a cat in front of the camera.
Cats have a special affinity for the screen. I've seen many meetings where the cat comes in.
Don't you think so? So yeah, they love to be in front of the camera. They like to preen and do all that stuff in front of the camera. Of course, yeah, totally get that. Yes.
Yes, yes. Also, as our physical work locations disappear and people can
Hmm.
work from anywhere, companies
Yes.
are rethinking, do we need to hire them in a particular location? I can hire them anywhere.
Yeah.
Given that the gig economy is also growing bigger for knowledge workers, how do you think that will affect pay scales?
I think a couple of things are going to happen. One is, the opportunity for people. While we say that theoretically this is something that's going to increase a lot, you have to keep in mind that the gig economy has been around. Or freelancers have always been there for a bit. We've looked at them as suppliers. We've looked at them as one-off conversations. But in this situation, it is possible, as people are really trying to figure out, do you need to have somebody on the roads for the entire duration or not? So some of those full-time jobs are going to get divided into freelance opportunities. So that's going to be one thing. And either case, for a couple of countries, US is one, Brazil is one, China is another, India is another, 3, 4 countries that I can think of. I mean, where the freelance economy is very, very big, and in some white collar jobs, especially, whether it's design, human resources, finance people, and UX coders, etc. A lot of these jobs have traditionally been done by freelancers. So those jobs are going to continue. I was talking to the CEO of one of the large headhunting firms the other day, and was talking about organizations, when they're looking to hire a CEO, they're now really sort of experimenting. I can't say it's the mainstream norm as yet, but you talked about enough examples where some large corporations are taking on somebody with an express idea that, we are sort of estimating that this thing is going to last for another couple of months. So before the new person joins in, can you keep the situation going? So there are those roles which are coming up. The second thing which is happening is even in the senior most roles, as I said, that this is one of the CEOs of the organization. What they're doing is they're sort of saying that we are going to try this out for 6 months. You run this. This is what are the milestones that we are expecting. And if this happens, we are happy to continue working with you in this. Otherwise, we are going to look for another person to take your place. So I think we are going to see new models of talent which are going to come in, new opportunities. Is it going to happen in every organization and every place? No, it's not. But I certainly think that it's going to sort of inch up a little bit like that, because think about it, work from home is something that's been around for a while, but not everyone was using it. Now there is a scenario where, it was very binary and everybody had to switch. But when these things happen, I think we reach a scenario where some of these changes are going to be permanent. It's a bit like if you think about security procedures before, the Twin Towers incident, people could take a lot more, flex approach when it came to security. Today, people have accepted that it's going to take this much of time. When I go through, standard line, I'm going to go through multiple frisking points. They're going to do surprise checks. All of that, we have reconciled to those. And those things have become permanent. They've not gone away. So I would imagine that some of these shifts that we are seeing now are also going to remain, in place. And we'll work around. Work is going to evolve into a very different being altogether.
Absolutely. And in the pre-COVID world, employers had the upper hand in recruitment. They could
Mm-hmm.
choose any employees. As this changes, as technology starts to disrupt the recruitment process and the way we work, do you think the skilled workers and candidates will also have an equal say in this process?
I think skilled workers have always had an important say in the process because, depending on the centrality of that role, depending on the rarity of the skill, so it's a talent is a demand supply curve. If you have abundance of whatever it is, you are really then going to be a lot more choosy about making that choice if you're a buyer. But when you're a seller, it's the same thing. If you're the only one, you can probably seek a higher price or a premium pricing. As the skill becomes a more commodity kind of a skill, then the premium pricing disappears. So many organizations historically, if I think about it, when I worked in tech companies, we've always had something called a hot jobs premium. So for those kind of skills, which are very central to the business existence, you've always had a hot jobs premium, or you sort of create, a set of stock options which mature over a span of time. Those are ways by which people have retained talent. When you think about this scenario right now, I think if you're an expert, many experts are going to find that the opportunities are a lot more attractive for them outside in the freelance world because they don't really need to go through an organization in order to find opportunities. So I think for a lot of people, that's what I think is going to happen.
Absolutely. And Abhijit, we spoke about onboarding a while ago. When a new employee joins and they don't meet their team in person, it's difficult to build trust when you don't, see them. What's your advice? What are the best practices here for onboarding in a virtual world?
I would think that there are two parallel tracks that I think you need to sort of visualize this as. So look at the visible part of it is really like when you watch a movie, there is the visible part of it, which is the pictures that you see on screen. But then there is another parallel soundtrack or the subtitles which are there. So you're sort of looking at that. The subtitles can only be seen if you pay attention to them. You switch it on and you see that. I would think that, in this new world, when you're onboarding somebody, you need to switch on the subtitles. So spending time informally with the person or letting teams meet informally, where you kind of set a time, and maybe that's what it is, that, at so and so time between this and this, you don't need to set up a meeting. We are going to keep our calendars free and anyone can call anyone to have a chat, which is not necessarily work related or maybe work related, but it's an unstructured piece. So if you make sure that the day has an element of unstructured opportunity for interactions, I think that's one of the big pieces that I see, would be emerging as an opportunity for either doing creative work or for onboarding people, or just sometimes you to go back and repair a dented relationship with a colleague. Those are opportunities that you can leverage to share a virtual coffee with a person and say, hey, look, this is what happened, here is how I see it, and let's put it behind us. So those all need opportunities which are a lot more unstructured. So I would see a
Absolutely.
prevalence of that.
Right, right. That's great. Also, Abhijit, what are your quick tips for our listeners to survive as well as outperform during the lockdown and through remote work?
I think being able to, manage your energy is one of the ways in which, people seem to do better. Um, Being aware of the time when, you are at your best. Some people are, more productive in the morning hours. I'm one of those people. I'm far more productive. So all the creative work, etc., that I want to work on, I put that out of my way, by before I start my meetings and all that stuff. So before the wee hours of the morning, and I'm done with all my creative output. And then I kind of again, I do all the work related stuff during in the pre-lunch session. Post lunch, I personally experience a bit of a slump, and I'm not super productive. What I've done is I've tried to give myself the flexibility to take a 15-20 minute power nap and then come back to work on something creative again, and that energizes me, and then I'm sort of good to go for the rest of the day. So this is how I divide my time. I do all my socializing, etc., all of that in the evening after 5. So that gives me the ability to do the structured piece of work and the conversations which are social. I try and keep those time boundaries a little more sacrosanct, because without doing that, you find that your routine takes a beating, your meal timings are irregular. It's important to have that fixed. So boundaries give you a great sense of sanity. So I would say that create those boundaries, whichever way it works for you. This is how it works for me. So I'm not saying that this is the best practice or anything. That's no way, but this is how it works for me. And if you can discover these kind of chunks for yourself, I think hopefully it should give you a little bit of a advantage.
Absolutely. I think structure is the secret to longevity and success here. That's true. And unstructured conversations with your colleagues. Yeah, I like that.
Completely. I always make sure that there is a section where I just call up, and most of the times I've called up my friends who I've not been in touch with for a long time. I've just picked up the phone and just given them a call, and they say, "Okay, so what's up? What are you working on?" I say, there is no agenda or anything of that sort. There's nothing. Just wanted to say hi to you and find out what you're doing. And I think it's extremely therapeutic for me and social, and I also derive a certain part of my energy through my social interactions, conferences, etc. I really miss my travel. I miss my conferences. There are virtual conferences, yes. So you're getting to join many more conferences. That's true. So that's a positive side. But for me, it is also about the time when I'm not in the conference hall, when I'm meeting people in the hallway. I'm bumping into, high-fiving my friends and taking pictures, posting that, all of that. I just so miss that. So I think I just have to be patient and wait for things to settle down, and when that will also happen, hopefully.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Abhijit, one last question for you is, what's your advice for college-going students who are missing their classrooms and friends?
Oh, I think I believe the people who are now getting into college in that zone, I think a lot of them are digitally extremely savvy. But I would say that again, I'm going to just go hopping on this whole thing, that the kind of informal ties that you can create is really what you carry on throughout the rest of your life. It's not really. Uh, think about it. You don't have the equal degree of closeness with everyone you went to school with or college with, or even your work colleagues. There are some people you're a little closer. So it is the extent of informal time that you spent with the people that builds that bond. So you can't do it with necessarily everyone. I understand that, because there's only so many hours of the day. But the more number of people you are able to build that bond, and then maybe out of that, some of them you go even deeper. Those are the relationships that you carry on for the rest of your life. And I think, this is going to be a time when you have to create new opportunities for yourself. So, I was just talking to one of the business leaders some time back, and he shared something which I thought was really super useful. And he said that if you think about your entire career in terms of 40 years, 50 years, whatever it is that you expect to work and live, in that 1 year is actually insignificant. So it is not going to define success or failure for you, regardless of whether you're at the beginning of your career, middle of your career, at the end of your career. It is going to be, 1 or 2 years is going to be that much as a percentage. It's negligible. The world is there ahead of you. So I think if you think about it in that sense, building and investing in those relationships and just enjoying the time that you have with your loved ones and your friends and people who mean a lot to you. I think this is an opportunity to think about that. I think that's one of the ways in which you stay positive, despite the fact that it is a challenging time for everyone. But this is how I find that very useful to live with. To be grateful for what I have.
Thank you. You said it well, and you put it well, Abhijit, when you say it's all about building relationships, because that's going to be the crux of success in both work and life, right? And like you said, life is a sum of social experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so very much for having me on your podcast, Anu. All the very best to you. Stay connected, stay curious.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Good luck with the book. I look forward to it. And one last thing for our listeners, Abhijit is not just a great speaker and writer, he's an amazing artist. And his sketches are worth looking forward to, which he publishes every week, right? On Mondays
Yes, yes.
on social media.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can actually join my newsletter, which is abhijitbhaduri.substack.com, and you can get those drawings there. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I post a lot of my drawings out there on LinkedIn a couple of times a week, so you can follow that. I summarize an idea or a book or an article in terms of a few drawings. So, hopefully it should make it stick for you. So thank you very much for pointing that out, Anu. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Abhijit.